All right. Well, this is Boyd Barrett again, and this is our narrator interviews author series. And today I have a special guest, Jess Lederman, who is the author of the last book that I voiced, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, hello, Jess.
Well, hey, how are you, Boyd?
Doing all right. I do want to say how we kind of got connected because there are a lot of narrators, I'm sure, that would be interested in this and who might be listening, and possibly authors as well. But what happened was I found out about a book by a man named Al Kimmel called Destined for Joy, which I thought would be an interesting one to narrate. And so when I connected him, he said that he was working with you, Jess, to put that together to and he you were kind of his go-between. So I ended up dealing with you more than I dealt with him. Now that book was fantastic, and it still is one of my best sellers, which is really interesting. But once we got that underway, and I had conversed with you over email, I found out that you were also an author and that you were in the midst of writing your second novel. So I sent you an excerpt of me reading part of that novel, and we said, okay, when you said whenever we're ready to do it, you're the man. And then while we were waiting for you to finish the book, we cooperated to do another book, and it was Lilith by George MacDonald, the classic Lilith, because Jess is a, a, a George MacDonald freak, I would say.
That's
That's
fair.
yeah,
That's fair.
and he actually runs a place called the Works of George MacDonald, and is involved with the George MacDonald Society, I believe. So I was able to do Lilith, which we can talk about later as well, because that was quite an experience. But before we get into the Ballad of Midnight in McCrae, which is the real reason for this, tell me a little bit about your life, your author journey, how you got into writing. I know this, as far as I know, this is your second novel.
Right. Right. Yeah, the I've been writing ever since I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. I remember one evening my older sister came in again. I was, maybe no more than 10 years old, and she read me a passage from John Dos Passos, um, the mid 20th century author, and it was over my head. But I was so captivated by the lyrical flow of words that it lit a fire inside of me. And basically, I've been writing ever since. But it's been in the last, 12 or 13 years that I've been doing that as my sort of primary passion.
Hmm. Hmm.
And initially with I had actually at one point sort of taken semi-retired from my job and gone with my late first wife to live in Paris and write a novel, which I'm now thankful to the Lord that was not ever accepted by any publisher.
Yeah, yeah,
And subsequently went to tried to do a second draft of it. Went to live in Idaho. I was sort of trying to do the Hemingway thing, right? Paris,
hmm
Idaho, and but that didn't work. Went back into the workaday world when my first wife passed away. She had always encouraged me to devote myself to writing. And when she passed away, we were up in Alaska and living not that far from where the Iditarod, the
hmm
iconic
hmm
dog sled race, uh, um, sets out each year, and that inspired me to was one of the inspirations. That's how the my novel Heart Set Free starts out in
Hmm.
Alaska, or the scene from the episode that inspired the Iditarod. I spent 3 or 4 years writing that novel, which has done pretty well. And then it's been another was another 4 or 5 year journey to write the Ballad of Midnight in McCrae, which
Yeah, yeah. Well, now, for those who are listening, if you are even, of course, I would love for you to listen to the audiobook. That would be my goal here. But if you're not an audiobook person, um, then get the book and read it because it is so well worth it. So, Jess, give us the elevator pitch. What is the story of the Ballad of Midnight in McCrae?
Well, Ballad of Midnight in McCrae. If I was doing the super short elevator pitch, you have Caleb McCrae is a devout Baptist uh, at a young age has become a Texas Ranger, whose passion is what he imagines justice is, and uh, serving who he imagines a God to be. And the world is one in which the good guys capture the bad guys, and sinners go to the just desert of eternal torment. But then his life turns upside down when he meets and falls in love with the notorious bandit Henry Midnight.
Right.
And so that's, there's the elevator pitch there for you.
And there's so much more to it. There are so many characters. Of course, I got to voice all of them, which was exciting. There are many, many voices, many, many very interesting characters, and a lot of nuance in this. As you said, there's at the center of it, a, uh, a romance between two men, and that had to be handled pretty delicately. And the nice thing about the book, and because it wasn't like I didn't have to read spicy scenes, but it was obvious, the relationship was obvious, and the depth of that relationship was obvious through the writing. So and I'm sure that was deliberate.
Oh yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, it's a book about love, and uh, I've always felt that there's never a need to be explicit
Right.
about how love it is expressed.
Hmm.
Um, but it is important to be the only thing that has to be explicit is what is the depth of that love?
Right.
What is the essence of relationship between any two human beings? And one of the it's interesting how all these things come together because we like you said, we met because of through Al Kimmel on the book you were recording for him, which was he was certainly a guy who is inspired by George MacDonald. I've been inspired by George MacDonald. And one of the MacDonald's great themes that has certainly been a theme for me is how important the understanding of the character of God is. Because if there is in fact a heavenly Father, then we as as men are fathers. What kind of a father do we have? And so that's why both in my first novel and in this novel, one of the sort of underlying currents, it's not the major topic, but an underlying current is, is God someone who would ever sentence anyone to eternal torment? If
Hmm.
what would that say about the kind of God we have if God would do something like that? And uh, so so when we when we think about who we are as fathers, it's going to come from what kind of ultimate father do we have, and how do people end up coming to faith? That's that's been a theme for me in both Heart Set Free and in this novel. Although I think handled in a way that uh, I think people who even someone who doesn't believe in God at all,
Right.
hopefully would find the novel rewarding.
Yeah, because the struggles are obvious among the characters. Each one of them is dealing with their belief systems, their their lives in different ways. And when it comes to the relationship between Midnight and McCrae, the setting is at a time when uh, that relationship would have definitely been rare, or at least rarely public.
Yeah.
And because it was set the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then on into, of course, the book goes on to the mid 1900s. So yeah, I guess the last scenes are in the is that the 50s or the
Well, the
let's see.
very last scene it takes place actually in the present day.
Well,
So
yes,
actually,
because
the
of the narrator.
narrator ultimately is a very old man by the
Hmm.
end. Right.
Yeah, which is one of the things that drew me to it because I had just recently done another kind of an epic, uh, sort of a old west Americana type setting, and I had played the narrator. The first person narrator was in mid 80s character. This particular narrator, by the time he's finished, is in his 90s, I believe.
Right.
So I with I'm in my 70s, so at least I can reasonably uh, be believed as an 80, 90-year-old man. And then bringing in the other voices as well. So yeah, and I think really one of the things that came to me during all this is that this is if if an audiobook narrator has a niche, that's important. And I'm finding that that seems to be my niche, that kind of epic, uh, uh, whether it's Old West or not, it doesn't have to be Old West, but Americana epic story. And that's exactly what this is. It goes on into the narrator's character goes to the Korean War and comes out of that. And then, it goes on into just some incredible stories that involved the what was happening with the atomic bomb, and that so it's very interesting. Um, so what what was the process like for you when I would narrate a chapter, put it up on ACX, and then you would listen to it? How did that work for you?
Oh, it was actually a thrilling experience for me because I was always, wondering, okay, how's Boyd going to voice this particular character and how's that going to work? And so, I'd listen to it, read along with at the same time. Sometimes I would do that one time, just listen, and then sometimes listen and read along at the same time. And what was remarkable to me is there were really very few points at which I said, oh, uh, I would do this a little differently. Hardly at all. It was a really kind of a meeting of the minds, or perhaps just something where the book spoke to you in such a way that you instinctively, or not to say that you didn't give it a lot of thought, but that it resonated with you in a
Mm.
way that just made you the natural narrator for it. And one of the things I've always been intrigued with audiobooks is, okay, you have typically one narrator, with some rare exceptions. You've done a book where there were multiple
Hmm. Hmm.
voices,
Yeah.
But again, you have male and female characters, and so you have on the one hand, one of your superpowers is your is the ability to project this very deep uh, voice. So that there's a arch villain in the novel
Hmm.
who is a demonic figure, and you spoke. Voiced him in this, basso profundo that was chilling, even to me as the author. But at the same time, we're able to do female characters
Hmm.
um, really very convincingly. So
Yeah.
that was fascinating to
Right. And not only
me
female
how
characters,
you
but
how you pulled that off.
female characters with Spanish accents.
Right.
So
That's right. And
most
sometimes
most of them.
multiple, right,
Yeah.
multiple women speaking
Right.
at the interacting with each other, and each one just slightly different from the other, and that does was re remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the process because I always wonder what's happening on the other end when I send it, and I get feedback, but it's good to hear that it's something that, because as a narrator, uh, part of it is it's a collaboration because it's your work of art, but the narration is my work of art, and I want them to blend. I want them to be something that will coordinate, and it's a collaboration. So it's always good for me to hear that that works. And when it doesn't work, I want to know, you know. And I'm sure there are
Yeah.
books
Yeah.
that it would not work for me. Just and so I try to stay away from some of the ones that I would not be able to resonate with, like you said. And
Mhm.
you mentioned instinctively. It's interesting as a narrator because yes, you read the book, you know the characters, but then while you're narrating, something does happen. Something happens inside you. If it doesn't, then you're not doing your job. Because narration, true narration comes from inside, not just the voice, not just speaking the words. Because if that was the case, then AI would take over everything. It tries
Mhm.
to take over narration, but it can't because AI cannot feel. It doesn't have emotions. And so when you feel like a narrator is connecting with a text, that's something AI can't do. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I tried to do that as much as possible with the narration. There's such beautiful in this book. There's beautiful, beautiful passages, and I loved doing those. And then the characters themselves, the emotion, the there are scenes. Oh, wow. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. So but there are scenes when the narrator is looking back on his birth. I won't say any more than that. But um, for a 90-something-year-old man to be looking back and thinking about when he was born and what happened, the circumstances surrounding it, it was that was an amazing thing that could happen inside me. So I
That
just
that
yeah.
scene, by the
Hmm.
way, probably went through more drafts than any other scene in the book. And I remember I'm fortunate to be part of a writing community, other authors, and have the opportunity to bounce scenes off of other
Hmm.
authors. And I remember the first time, my first version of that scene was far shorter than the final
Right.
version. And I remember my friend who read it saying, he says, I didn't cry
Uh-huh.
well, in this scene. I felt I should have, and that it's such a intensely
Yeah.
emotional scene that it probably took me longer to write and get that one right than any
Yes.
other, and you were tremendously effective in
Yeah.
it was very moving listening to you to read that. The I'm For me, the sound of words is can often be almost as important as their meaning. It is a book which I think of it as sort of a uh, lyrical novel,
Yes.
and the the end of chapters. I think is true for a lot of authors. The end of chapters is very important. And one of the things that I loved was your rhythms and your approach toward how you would read those chapter endings. And the very last page, not least of all, was especially gratifying.
Wow. Yeah. And I understand exactly what you're talking about because I work very hard at that because you want a listener, once they hear that last line, you want them to think, I've got to go on to the next. I've got to hear the next chapter. And so that's it. Um, for those of you who are watching this, listening, please, you know, listen or read this book. It's wonderful. Um, but I also want to talk about Lilith because that was it talking about an experience narrating. There was a scene in that, and you'll know the scene because it's near the end, and it's when Lilith really is in the depths of experiencing what she had to experience. And I get chills right now just thinking about it. It was so emotional to read, and there were more than that scene. But in fact, I would come out of the my booth and go find my wife and say, "This is just unbelievable." So talk a little bit. I know you could talk forever about George
Mhm.
MacDonald because you know his writing so well and they've affected you. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, MacDonald is, I think, rightly often referred to as the grandfather or maybe great grandfather or godfather of modern fantasy fiction.
Hmm.
And Lilith, his whole writing career was bookended by two epic fantasies, Fantastes, which he wrote I think in his at a much younger age, and was the book that famously uh, ins got impelled C.S. Lewis on his journey from atheism to becoming a devout Christian. He bought the book at a train station on his way back to college. And then much later in life, MacDonald came back to fantasy in writing Lilith, and he gave a copy to a friend of his in which he inscribed something in that copy that I think perhaps sums up the essence of the book and an essence of much of MacDonald's writing, which he wrote, "The death of self, the death of self is the gate of life."
Mm. Mhm.
And this is one of the major themes for him, and it's one which, in my own humble way, I try to explore as well in the two novels that I've written. This
Yes.
idea that we have to be willing to when we can finally kill, sacrifice, crucify even this self-seeking, grasping. Uh, Self within us in the Ballad of Midnight in McCrae. For the narrator as a young man, it's the part of him that wants this, what he imagines glory to be. He wants to outshine his father. He's going to become the greatest um, fighter pilot
Hmm.
of all time. And it's only when those illusions and fantasies and self-deceptions can die that we can really begin to live as we're meant to, that we can have the sort of joyful life that we're meant to. And Lilith it's a complex book with a narrator who goes on a journey of very much of of self-discovery. But Lilith, of course, is the in sort of religious mythology was Adam's wife before Eve, and became in folk mythology
Hmm.
a uh, kind of a demonic figure. Parents could tell their kids, "Be good," or during the night, Lilith will make off with you, right? And in the novel Lilith, Lilith is uh, it has refused to give up that all those illusions and that come with ego and with the self seeking for itself, the greedy, all-consuming self. And in fact, her fist is clenched, and
Yes,
that's sort
yes,
of the symbolizes that unwillingness to yield. And it is only when she can, only when any of us can give up uh, and sacrifice that false self, that we can begin to live. And so, death as in fact really a new life is a big theme for MacDonald, and certainly a big theme in the novel Lilith.
yes, yes. And it was probably, if not the one of the most beautiful pieces of literature that I've ever, especially that I've ever narrated, but even just ever read. There are just passages that would take my breath away. So I began to see, I had read some MacDonald before, but this is the first time I had narrated one. And of course
Mhm.
MacDonald's works are already out there in narration form. They're in audiobook form, but this is one that was done with an an introduction, an extensive introduction by a scholar. And it's beautifully illustrated. If you ever get the actual book, it's beautifully illustrated as well. But so I got to do the narration for this, and I think because of that, I understand why he is so influential. I can understand why Lewis would have been influenced, and Tolkien, the others. It was just unbelievable. So that's another audiobook I would love for you to pick up. If you're out there and you're interested in George MacDonald, or just interested in fantasy, or interested in some of the deep things that Jess was just talking about, it's all there. There's beauty, there's life, there's depth. Um, so Lilith is something that will live with me for a while. I went back and listened to it myself, just again. Of course, I listened to it over and over again when I was recording it, but I listened to the whole thing again, and it was just, there's an experience there. Is there anything else that you would like to say about either our process or about the book itself, The Ballad of Midnight in McCrae, that would be interesting to those that would be watching this?
What one thing I'll say is that in my writing, both my first novel, Heart Set Free, and this one, also very much inspired by landscape,
Hmm.
by the
Yes.
particularly the southwestern desert. And to
Hmm.
me, it's a tremendously evocative. The novel begins with a almost sort of mythic chase through
Yes.
the deserts outside of El Paso, Texas, where starting out on horseback, where the Texas Ranger uh, Caleb McCrae is chasing the bandit Henry Midnight, and then both their horses end up dying, and they end up having to hobble, and Caleb's leg is injured, and they have to hobble through
Hmm.
100 miles or so back to the together back to the city of El Paso. And the the desert itself, which is this beautiful, the beauties of the desert, and yet it's also this treacherous and deadly place. And we have the same, in the same way we have deserts in inside of ourselves, waterless places inside of ourselves, but we also have this the great beauty, and so I find writing about the desert, that it's a wonderfully, sort of cinematic place
Yes.
to set
Yes.
stories, but also very has layers of meaning that merge well with the kind of themes I like to write about. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, in that particular landscape and the way it's written, another thing that lended itself to my voice, because I have a Southwest type of voice,
yeah,
that type of feel. And again, it fit with what I like to do, and I really hope that it hits listeners the same way that it hit me as I was narrating. I was just trying to think of another topic that, well, okay, I know this is something I wanted to say. This particular book is such a mixture because it's this grand epic story, but then it has theological, philosophical underpinnings, the struggle that the characters go through in their own belief systems, and and then just a unique, what I believe is a unique relationship at the center of it. Because one thing we didn't say about Henry Midnight is he's originally from England. He was a son of I don't know if it's a lord or this son of someone high up and
right.
and so he comes to the United States and lives with the Native Americans, learns some of their ways. So you have the McCrae character, who, as you said before, was kind of a fundamentalist, believing Christian, who meets this guy it's just so unique. The relationship they have is so unique, and I enjoyed voicing that.
Yeah, well, and you did such a good job on it. The one of the things that you did that was great, which I think one of the strengths of the novel, I hope, is just that there's passages that are very funny, right? I mean,
Yes.
humor is a motivating is one of the things that motivates me, and this juxtaposition between this uh, uh, Henry Midnight, who has been uh, he spent a much time with the Hopi
Hmm.
Indians on in their homeland of Black Mesa in northern Arizona,
Right.
and knows all of their legends. And it's a he is there's a he's one of the drivers, I think, of the humor in the story, because
Yes.
he's this one reviewer called it he's a sort of righteously mischievous, right? So that's which was a lot of fun for me to write, and wonderful how you gave voice to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
Yeah.
yeah, and the other thing is that I write historical fiction where I like to bring in actual
Hmm.
characters,
Yes.
particularly ones that perhaps are a little less well
Hmm.
known, uh,
Frederick
like uh,
Douglass.
like
Yeah.
well, Frederick Douglass is pretty well known, but yeah, but it was fun to bring him in. But John Horse, for
Yes.
example, the
Hmm.
Seminole sort of mixed blood, black and Indian,
Yes.
and who's probably not that well known to most Americans, but really an epic character. Um, but also um, Black Elk,
Yes. Black
and
Elk. Uh-huh.
who many people have read, probably not enough as should, but who one of the things I bring up at the end of the novel or make reference to is the fact that he is currently up for being considered for canonization by the Vatican, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah,
Yes.
and so here he was a figure who he never abandoned his traditional Lakota religious beliefs, but at the same time a devout uh, became a Christian and brought hundreds and hundreds
Yeah.
into the church. And so one of the themes in the book is this, where Caleb McCrae begins with the typical sort of fundamentalist belief that, okay, there's this correct way to think about God and everything else that doesn't fit into that orthodoxy is just wrong, versus a more of a universalist way
Mhm.
of looking at it and say, okay, there are
Yeah.
different ways of approaching and thinking and experiencing God. So the character of Black Elk sort of epitomizes that, and I had
Yes.
him play a pretty important role in the
Right.
novel.
That's for sure. Well, we need to wrap up, but I want to tell you, I know this is I'm hoping this is not your last novel. Hopefully you've
No,
got some
not at
more
all.
you've got some more in
Um,
the works.
oh
But
yeah.
yeah, so because your writing is superb and I enjoyed it so much. Enjoyed working with you and hopefully there'll be more in the future. So I appreciate you spending the time. I hope this is helpful for other authors and narrators who might think about working together because it art is something that is sometimes better when it's in collaboration.
For sure.
There's an individual thing to it, but collaboration makes it even better. So I appreciate you, Jess, and thanks for letting me be the voice of your art and your work.
Well, thank you, Boyd. I couldn't imagine anyone better to have done it.
Well, thank you so much. All right. Um, until next time.